I want a nice, clean toilet seat. You know how many butts have been on that toilet seat? I want a fresh one. New house, fresh seat.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Real Estate Show. I'm Tiffany Weber, a real estate attorney in North Carolina. We got 3 offices, Mooresville, Denver, and Huntersville. And today I'm joined by my favorite co-host, your number one on the pod, number 1 in my heart, Ryan Weber.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me again. Really, it just boiled down to none of your attorneys had time to come record with you, and it's way more fun talking to somebody than talking to yourself.
That is true. But I'm also very happy to have you.
Well, thank you.
And today, our topic is something that you know very well on account of the number of times in our relationship that you have made me move. So what to do after you close on a home?
Yeah, so, I think a lot of people understand that you go to the attorney's office, you sign your documents, and you get your keys. Once you get those keys, well, I'm just saying, once the keys are in your hand, that is where we're going to start this process. Because a lot of people are like, well, what do I do? I just want to move in. But there's a couple other things from a paperwork perspective and, getting things in order perspective that you might not know because you're a first time home buyer, or you buy 3 houses in your lifetime. And so it's not something you do every day. Mm-hmm. So post getting the keys in your hand, what are we doing?
Let's see. I'm probably beginning with some people would say change the locks, which is one of them. But my first thing would be you just were handed a bunch of important documents. Go ahead and get them organized and stored, whether that's digitally, if you've got a safe, whatever. I'm going to get those stored and somewhere that I can remember where they are and can get back to them when I need them, which will be
for tax season.
Definitely for tax season.
But then you might need it for other things if they reconfigure your loan, or you need to look up, the amortization schedule. There's a lot of different things, but we know for a fact you will need it for tax season.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the first thing I'm doing.
Change the locks. That's a great one.
Well, I was thinking that was going to be, those things are pretty close for me.
Yeah. I was thinking of another thing along that lines, and I never thought of this. And you know who gave us this? Our very first real estate agent when we bought our house, when we were 21 and 20. He said, every new house I buy, I recommend changing the toilet seats.
Oh, yes. I forgot. That's right.
And I actually, I never hear anyone say that. And I'm like, that's a great point. Yeah. I want a nice, clean toilet seat. You know how many butts have been on that toilet seat? I want a fresh one.
I forgot that.
New house, fresh seat.
Shout out Harold Blackwell.
Yeah.
That was really good. So now with all of the Ring doorbells, et cetera, it's not just changing the locks anymore. It's also making sure that those devices are unpaired, data deleted, et cetera, so that no one else has access to them and that you get it set up for your own access. In North Carolina, our newest version of the standard offer to purchase puts that obligation on the seller that you must unpair and delete all this data. Their listing agreement says that. But not everybody remembers that as part of the closing. There's so much going on. That once you get there and you've got a Ring doorbell, make sure that nobody else has access to it. Get it reset.
I think another thing too, just prior to moving in, any cleaning or any renovations you want to do, it's so much easier to do before your stuff is in there. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be changing your carpets out, if you're going to be cleaning the carpets, if you're going to just get a deep clean from a cleaning crew coming in, do that before you move your stuff in, because it's so much easier, faster, better, cheaper, all of the above. It's way better to do it before you've moved your things into your house.
Yeah. We know not everybody can do that because of timing constraints, but if you have the ability to delay your move in to finish up anything that you want to do, then your life is going to be easier.
Yes. We've only moved 6 or 8 times, so we have a little bit of knowledge on this.
Yeah, we've done it both ways. The waiting when we were able was way easier.
Yes.
Would highly recommend. I'd say also you set up utilities. Some of those things you can do before closing, but depending on your location and the utility provider, they may not put anything in your name until they see the closing disclosure. And where do you get that? At the closing. So you're not going to be able to give that to them before closing because you don't get it until then. And they're going to want to see it signed, showing that, they may not always require the recorded deed, but, to them, like the closing disclosure signed by everybody is good enough to prove like it's yours now. So knowing that ahead of time, trying to get the utilities set up and what each company requires helps a lot. But for the ones that you can't set up till after closing, you're going to need to do that immediately.
Yeah. Now, with kind of setting up utilities, and this is what I kind of lump into, this is what Tiff does at our house. I usually do the utilities or one or two of them, but she kind of takes care of the rest of this. There's a lot of other little things as far as like updating like your insurance or homeowner's insurance, or what are those things that we need to make sure we update that's not just like automatically done for you?
Yeah. So new homeowners insurance, if you're getting a loan, is part of the closing. Okay. But old homeowners insurance, you got to call and cancel it.
That's the one that that's one I always forget.
Yeah. We've forgotten that one a time or two. So calling to make sure that you cancel the homeowner's insurance on the house that you've sold, but not until you've sold it. Wait till it closes before you cancel it, even if you're in a new house, because if something happens during that time period, then you're in a world of hurt. So that would be one thing. This was other thing on my list is knowing where to send payments and or setting up auto pay.
Yes.
So we're an auto pay family. We like to set everything up on auto pay. If you're getting a loan, that's not something that you'll be able to do the day of closing most often, because most lenders take a little bit to get that set up. But like, for example, last time we bought a house, within a week, we got the link to set up auto pay. We did that. Another thing to do is review that paperwork to say, who am I making my first payment to? Is it the person that I got or is it the company I got the loan with, or have they sold the servicing to another company? So knowing to whom you make your payments and how you do that.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that? Because I think, a lot of, especially first-time home buyers, or like our elderly home buyers, when their loan gets sold, they might get upset and mad, and they don't quite understand it. So can you explain like and you don't have to do in deep detail, but just from a quick perspective of loans get sold, and it's usually at the early stages of the loan.
But it could be at any point.
Yeah. So like, don't be alarmed if your loan gets sold, and like kind of walk someone through that.
So in most standard loan documents with an institution, like a big lender, not a private lender, then the loan documents are pretty consistent. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they promulgate these documents. And in there, the lender retains the right to sell the servicing or transfer the servicing to another company without your permission. They don't need your permission to do it. And yes, these documents are one-sided. They're either like you want the house or the money to buy the house, or you don't. If you don't want to sign these documents, try to do it another way.
You're free to do it another way. It's just you're not going to do it with our company.
Right. So they retain the right to transfer the servicing. What they're not permitted to do is change any of the terms of your loan. So your interest rate can't be affected. If your monthly payment can't be affected as far as principal and interest goes. As we know, if you have escrow, that fluctuates based on those escrowed charges. So the terms of your loan, the length of the loan, all of those things must stay the same. The servicer just becomes now the company that is taking and applying your payments and processing payoffs, et cetera. Not every company that originates loans has the infrastructure to then also service the loans. So that's why you'll see, maybe you get a loan with company A, but then next thing you know, Mr. Cooper is who you're making your payments to. And it's extremely common. And if that's something that is very important to you, that you don't want your loan to be sold, then ask your lender up front, do you sell the loans? But know that even if they're not right now, they're going to retain the right to in the future. So they, even if they say they don't sell the loans, that might change in the future.
Yeah.
But if that's something that's extremely important to you, then ask that up front.
Yeah. Don't be alarmed if your loan is sold. It's very common practice in that industry, and it really doesn't. It's illegal to change it. So your terms are not going to change. It's just who you're making.
And you
the
have to be
to.
given a certain amount of notice. So you can't. It can't be sold on Friday and then your loan payment's due on Monday to the new servicer. That you have to have, I think it's 60 days in most loan documents, 60 days notice before you make your payment to the new servicer.
Yeah. I think another point to mention too is, after you get your keys, one of the first things you should do is make note of when your first payment is due, because a lot of times you might skip a month. And then also you have all these documents coming in. There's the scam papers coming in. You've got the fake buy your deed at this, and then you just got all this new mail. You've got hectic stuff happening because you're moving in, and you might just forget.
Yeah.
And
don't
you might
miss your
miss
first
it.
payment.
And that's like,
don't miss a payment, but especially
I think that's the most
one.
common payment miss is the first payment.
Yeah, because you don't have it set up,
Right.
you know? Which is why I said know who you make your payments to and when and how. And the last thing I had was get to know your neighborhood. Where's your grocery store? Where's your post office? Where's the UPS place? You know, like all the stuff that you're going to need to do. You know, maybe if you're moving within the same town, that's not an issue. But if you're moving to a new city, then you're going to need to know pretty quickly where all of this, where life happens. You know, where is that stuff? And you know, get to know your staple restaurants. Where's the best pizza place that you can order pizza on your first night in the house? All of that.
Is there any other things that a home buyer has to do or make sure that they do after the papers are signed and they leave the office? Generally, you guys take care of everything. Like those papers are signed, they get the keys, and they're good to go, right? Almost
always, yeah. There could be, you know, if the lender has some paperwork that the client's required to e-sign that doesn't come to our office, that might be, you know, that has to be done on the day of closing. So they might leave our office and still have documents to sign. We try to make it so that they can't leave unless they've also done that process. But for the most part, no. Other than these things that we've talked about.
I want you to elaborate on just one small thing, because you made this quick point that you caught me on, and I'll let you kind of elaborate what you're talking about. But when you sign your paperwork and you leave the closing office, you may not get the keys. And why is that?
In North Carolina, our recording statute is a race statute, meaning it's a race to the courthouse, and the property ownership doesn't transfer until the document's actually recorded. So until that deed's on record, the seller still owns the property, and they're not required to give you access to the property until you own it.
Now, many times they may allow you, or...
I wouldn't even say many. It's probably about 50-50.
And what would that kind of look like? What do you guys call that?
So it's up to the seller. It's the seller's discretion, and usually the things that influence them to be willing to give the keys is, one, how was the transaction smooth up to this point? Were the parties easy working together well?
Are the funds already wired?
That was going to be my next thing. Yeah. Are all of the funds needed to close in the attorney's trust account? And that's kind of the magic potion. Yeah. But I've seen, you know, all of those things. You know, I had a closing yesterday where all of those things were true, and the seller still didn't give the keys, and that's their right. So, but I say it's more likely than not that the sellers will give the keys if all of the money is in the trust account and it was smooth.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's some good points, and that's a big thing too. Like, people think they're leaving the closing office with the keys, and that's not always the case. You know, it shouldn't be the case unless the seller is allowing it. And
the law doesn't require that. It's only in the seller's discretion.
Yeah, it is not going to be recorded before you leave the office unless you sit around for a couple hours.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if you want it to be recorded and before you leave the office, then there's going to be a significant period of time where you're just waiting in the lobby.
Yeah, I think that's some good information for people to kind of understand, especially like I said, the first time home buyers, maybe you haven't bought a house in 10, 15 years. Like, you forget what happens. You know, I signed my paperwork. I understand that part. Once the papers are signed, what's kind of that thing? And, you know, you've got the time to wait to your keys, but then you get your keys, and then my mind goes blank because I'm excited to move in. Yeah. Here's a couple of things you need to remember.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's all I've got for this one. I mean, of course, there's endless things that you could do after you close on a house, but these are my top things. Throw a party. Yeah. You know what? That nothing will get you in gear to have your house set up than having a party on the books that you're hosting. You know, like, people will be like, okay, we're closing, you know, the second week of November, but Thanksgiving's at our house.
We just had some people move into our neighborhood, and I think they closed maybe 4 or 5 days before Christmas, which good for them. And then they had people over for New Year's Eve. And I was like, they had a deadline to get things ready, and they did it.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not moving again for a long time, but if we do, that's what we'll do. We'll have a party set on the schedule.
We'll have a moving party.
Yeah.
Everyone can move one thing.
We've done that before too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining me today on this episode. Like I said, my favorite guest host.
I'm always excited to bring this wealth of knowledge to
We always
the
get
real estate
comments
show.
when you're on too of like, he should just always be on it. You
know? No, usually it's like, why is he wearing a hat? It's because I want to.
Oh yeah, people didn't like your Space Jam hat. I love that hat.
Yeah, well, so be it. Yeah. Thank you, Internet.
Well, that's the end of our show. We will catch you on the next episode.